The sun was setting when Pintel finally returned to the campsite. He had 2 more fish by then, and Ragetti finally had a fire going. There must have been flint in some of the island's rocks, because the younger man said he'd given up on his sticks hours ago and gotten the blaze he needed by scraping one of those stones against his sword blade to make sparks. It was hard to tell by firelight if his eyes were still red from crying, but he sounded composed, and he seemed to be in much better spirits. Pintel decided to play along. They salted the 2 smaller fish to make jerky. The largest one they staked on a long stick to roast over the fire. Pintel held that wooden limb like another fishing rod while he sat in the sand by the flames. Poochie lounged off to his right, gnawing on the mango's pit like it was an oddly shaped ham bone. Ragetti sat to his left with the remaining half of the fruit in his lap. He'd offered it to his older friend earlier, but Pintel had insisted that the whole thing belonged to the lad. No need for a finder's fee this time. Rags didn't seem to want to eat the rest of it in front of him, understandably, so the youngster was letting his mismatched gaze wander the stars above while he waited for dinner. "Nice breeze tonight," he remarked. "Actually feels kinda warm." Pintel smiled to himself. Rags had come a long way from stripping down to his skin over some back sweat.
"Aye,"
the stockier man agreed.
"We've been lucky with the weather."
He knocked on his wooden roasting stake like the superstitious sailor that he was.
"Hope it can stay this nice a bit longer."
"Long enough for us to find the pal," Ragetti clarified for him. Pintel's cheer faded. An uneasy silence hung over the pair for a moment until he plucked up the nerve to break it.
"Rags, I'm really sorry about yesterday. What happened when we was arguing below deck. And I'm sorry about all those other times when I—"
"It's all right," Ragetti cut in without looking at him. "That weren't you. You were the curse. It made all of us a little—" He trailed off.
"Unfeeling,"
Pintel supplied dryly. Ragetti shied away, not buying his own excuse either. Pintel shook his head and stared into the fire.
"It weren't from that. The Navy might have started all our misfortunes, but everything after that was on me. Deserting the service, joining Sparrow's crew, and then the mutiny against him. Keeping away from Kingston long as we did. Those was my choices, but I took it out on you all them years. It ain't right."
His throat suddenly clenched.
"And it ain't no way to honor your mum's memory."
That especially made Ragetti flinch, but he held it together. He also kept his real eye hidden from view. "So," he said bitterly, "you admit you don't really knows what you're doing." Pintel grimaced, then nodded. He deserved a low blow like that. Ragetti looked down at the rest of his mango then and softened. He turned the piece of fruit thoughtfully in his hands as he continued. "Well, I am glad we's out of the Navy, even if what came after it was worse." Pintel lifted his humbled gaze again, caught off guard. Ragetti was clearly too ill at ease to let his thank you stew for long. "You know, I've been thinking about that curse," he moved on. "It really were 1,000,000 to 1 odds against us ever lifting it. I means, if any one little thing towards the end had happened at all differently, we'd still be cursed. We'd be stuck with it forever with no more hope of ever lifting it." He started rocking again with a slight warble in his voice. Pintel inched closer to him. "Imagine it," Ragetti went on. "If Bootstrap didn't have no child. If that puppet from Port Royal never found his medallion. If his son hadn't made it off of that Navy ship we blew up and sunk 'cause we was too stupid to consider who anyone aboard her might be. And then even after we did lift it, the odds of ever getting out of prison alive—"
"Terry."
The youngster ceased his rocking and faced his comrade. Pintel met that wide blue eye and leaned closer.
"We beat those odds. We made it. It's over."
He reached out slowly and placed a hand on Ragetti's arm.
"Maybe leave it lie and just start looking ahead now."
His listener squirmed uncomfortably. Pintel quickly guessed why and let go of him. He had only half withdrawn his hand when one of Ragetti's flew over and grabbed his coat sleeve. Their arms hovered together like that for a few beats, both afraid to break the contact. Then the older pirate rested his elbow on the rock between them, with those thin, shaky fingers still kneading his fabric. Ragetti wiped his nose with his own coat sleeve and spoke in a steadier voice.
I don't want to forget the past, not even the bad parts. It's what made me.
Me? I needs it.
Pintel scoured his brain for the right words. How did captains like Sparrow and Barbossa have such a way with them? Then I guess, learn what you have to from the bad parts, and then keep 'em in a chest of sorts, he said carefully. Stash 'em away somewhere so you knows where they is when you needs 'em, but they can't hurt you in the meantime.
And what about me mum?
Ragetti murmured.
She sort of feels good and bad right now.
The bad parts ain't from anything she did, and you'll always have the good parts with you. They're what makes you you. His nephew held his gaze for a long time, and a warmth that had nothing to do with the campfire appeared in that blue eye. Ragetti let go of Pintel's sleeve then, and turned aside sheepishly.
Well, I'm sorry if me has been tough to deal with lately.
Runs in the family.
There was a hint of a smile.
I guess I just has to get better at looking ahead in life.
Pintel pondered that, then glanced at his roasting sea bass.
Well, he quipped, maybe a full stomach'll give you a clear head. This fella looks ready.
He brought their dinner closer and used his sword to slide it from the stick onto the rock between them.
All's we gotta figure out now is how to catch some chips with the next one.
Ragetti chuckled. The campsite was still in the shade when Pintel woke the next morning. That was pretty much the only comfortable thing he could say about it. He groaned from his stiff neck and back and used the rock beside him to sit up. The next 5 minutes were spent shaking sand from his hair and, Davy Jones save him, out of his breeches. It was a wonder a crab didn't come tumbling out with the lot of it. Pintel was halfway through giving his boots the same shakedown when he happened to glance Ragetti's way. What he saw made him forget all about the sand. The lad lay on his side next to the charred, ashy remains of their campfire, still asleep. One of his arms was folded under his head as a pillow. The other was draped over a sleeping Poochie. Pintel blinked and rubbed his eyes a few times to make sure it wasn't a mirage. It was real. Either the dog had curled up next to his slumbering Rags and the kid's arm had unwittingly moved to that fuzzy heat source, or the two had shared a heart-to-heart of their own last night after Pintel had nodded off. The old sea rat chose his own conclusion and gazed out over the beach at the morning seascape. There was no sunrise on this side of the island, hence the shade, but the sky with its vibrant patchwork of colors was every bit as stunning, and the breeze actually did feel kind of warm. Pintel sat there quietly, taking it all in. When was the last time he'd done that? Just sat and relaxed, with no goals or ideas or schemes on his mind, and simply enjoyed the world around him. Had it been before the curse? Had it been before the Navy? Had it been with Edith? He closed his eyes as a wave of guilt and grief washed over him. That was all he could feel for a moment. But then he also felt the breeze. He felt the light spray of mist from the water, the dwindling trace of the night's coolness in the air, and even the warmth and softness of the sand underneath him. He took in all of those sensations, and then gradually the guilt and grief receded. Learn what you have to from the bad parts, and then keep them in a chest of sorts. Pintel had failed his sister, but not completely. He still had a part of her with him, a part that could still come out all right in the end, even if it wanted to find the way for itself now. He could still help it to learn and grow, because that part still wanted him around. He just didn't have the foggiest clue how to give that help. But maybe he'd get a few ideas along the way. He did have a good one every now and then, and he still had plenty of room for his own growth. The guilt and grief soon returned, but just like those bone-chilling waves on his feet the day before, They grew more bearable each time he weathered them. He was alive again. He was free. And so was his nephew. And with Edith Ragetti as his witness, he was going to help her son stay that way. Rags didn't have quite the reaction Pintel had hoped for when he woke to find Poochie lying next to him. There was some yelling and shooing, but no hitting or cursing or anything else an angry pirate might inflict on an unwelcome animal. His uncle decided it was all just a show, so the youngster wouldn't have to hear any gloating or teasing from him. They packed up and set out in the longboat shortly afterwards. Their plan was still to head for Pelagosto, and while history had taught Pintel not to expect to find the Black Pearl on its shore, something else was telling him they would this time. And what sort of a businessman would he be if he ignored an intuition like that? Ragetti wasn't exactly overflowing with enthusiasm for the idea, but he did seem enough in favor of it. That was why hours later, after he'd conveniently finished the rest of that mango and let Pintel row them most of the way to their destination, the lad's first words on the matter were so irksome.
We shouldn't steal the pearl.
Pintel stopped rowing mid-stroke and glared at him.
Excuse me?
I means, it's all well and good if we finds her on that beach with Sparrow still aboard and he lets us join his crew, but if she's there by herself, it'd be a sin to takes her.
You means it'd be a crime?
Aye, it would be, true enough, but it'd also be a sin.
Pintel knew what his boatmate was rooting around for in that canvas bundle before Rags even pulled it out. When he saw that blasted book emerge, he braced himself for a different type of stroke.
Thou shalt not steal,
Ragetti recited as he held the Bible in front of him.
Says it right here in this book in black and white. And I could also stress thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's goods, but it's already too late for that one.
Pintel squared his shoulders and narrowed his eyes. Oh, what had he started?
Well, if I and me sinner's ways ain't mistaken, he grumbled snidely, it also says thou shalt not bear false witness in there somewheres. Seems a little odd for you to square with that one now, don't it, Mr. Jones?
You came up with that lie, not me.
Pintel drew in one oar and patted the shaggy head behind him.
Oh, Poochie, give me strength.
That's blasphemy.
So's your face.
Come on, Pin. You said it yourself that the mango you found were a miracle. Otherwise we'd be finding groves of 'em all over the Caribbean. It were nothing short of divine providence what made that tree survive on that island.
Aye, well, divine providence didn't spend an hour squeeze testing every mango on that tree till it found an edible one. And by the way, divine providence is a right lousy farmer if that many of its mangoes went bad in season.
There's still one more good mango than either of us has ever grown,
Ragetti declared self-righteously. He opened his Bible then and held it up to his chin for the other pirate to see. His eye was fixed on its pages as he emphatically turned each one. Pintel actually wondered for a minute if his companion had learned how to read on top of everything else, but then he caught a glimpse of the text on those pages. Rags was holding the book upside down. Abner Pintel smirked to himself and resumed his rowing. Let the little whippersnapper think he'd won this round. It'd be good for his growth anyway. Maybe even for both of theirs. They each had a lot of growing to do. And heaven, earth, and Edith permitting, he and Ragetti would be growing together for a very long time.